President Yoon of South Korea enacted martial law about 4, maybe 5 hours ago, 6 max, and it came out of the blue. No one was expecting it. I wasn't expecting it, but I'm also not a Korean expert, and so I messaged the very few I know, and they said no, they were not expecting it either. And every commentator and expert I could see online seemed to be completely blindsided by this. In fact, not only were the political experts and the commentator class blindsided by this, but also those in the Korean parliament seemed to be blindsided by this. Even those within President Yoon's own right-wing political party seemed to be surprised by this. It's hard for me to quite wrap my head around the last 6 hours of political developments out of Korea, because it's been a roller coaster ride. And it went quick, it went fast, it went hard, and then it ended. And so we're going to go through this. We're going to talk about why opposition leaders are calling this a coup and are now saying since the martial law period has ended, I would say likely prematurely. I doubt he just wanted to go martial law for 4 or 5 hours. Why many South Koreans are now calling for his impeachment and removal from office, and some even jailing, even though that I think might be a little bit more difficult to achieve than his impeachment, obviously. So let's get into this because we have a lot to break down. So first thing is first, the South Korean president has not had a really good time as of late. To put it bluntly, he's not popular. Nobody likes him. He is the weird kid at school that nobody sits with at lunchtime and everybody distances themselves from during time on the blacktop playground. That's him. And, you know, I don't know the man personally, obviously. I'm sure some of you were holding out for that, but I don't. So I cannot tell you exactly why his approval rating is so low in South Korea. But what I can tell you is that his approval rating, despite all of the domestic reasons that causes it to have gone from he wins election to immediate plummet to like 17% approval, some of the issues that it has caused for him is, number one, it's very hard for him to compromise and work with the opposition on legislation. And I think this is most evidently shown, and he has to do it because the opposition has a majority of parliamentary seats in the South Korean parliament. So he has to do it. He has to do it. Yoon Suk Yeol has to do it. But he doesn't have the votes to do it. And the things he wants to do, the budget he wants to pass for next year, the military budgetary increases he wants to put in place, he can't do it without the cooperation of the opposition. And the opposition does not want to give him what he wants. It's not just this, by the way. There's a bunch of other issues outside of the primary one, which seems to be budgetary, that is a point of friction between the president and the opposition. One example of this, and I'm not going to go into all of it, I'm just going to go into what I know. I'm not going to speculate and pretend to know something I don't. But one example of this would be military aid to Ukraine. While the president of South Korea hasn't formally endorsed military aid to Ukraine, he has been vaguely open to the idea of selling weapons to Ukraine. Now, under the South Korean constitution, you cannot sell weapons to an active war zone. Now, is that a way of the South Koreans kind of coping and making them feel better about themselves for making a ton of weapons for the world? When I say a ton of weapons for the world, I think they're like the 4th largest arms manufacturer on the planet. And if you think that an American arms market is like a capitalist degeneracy at the bottom, you go check out a South Korean arms market and they will find a drone that will wipe your ass, hold your cup, and then blow up the enemy. They make so many different commercial variants of a ton of standard Western weapons that it, you know, a lot of variation, not even necessarily to like this one buyer wants this one thing, or there is this goal on the battlefield, we must fix this goal, of trying to find the needs or possible variants they can make of certain weapon systems. For example, let's say America doesn't want to sell a rocket to a country. South Korea can then make that rocket and of a different variety, of a different design, be very similar, and then sell it to them, or make alterations to make it more consumer friendly. Very consumerist arms market over in South Korea. But they don't sell weapons to countries at war. And their country's a war zone. So making all these weapons meant for war, but then when a country's at war, not selling them to a country at war, is it a way to make yourself feel better, or is there any humanitarian practice here? I don't know. We'll have to leave it for another day. But the only way that constitutional provision could be changed is with a majority in the Korean parliament that the opposition has given him zero indication that they want to give him. And there has been a few opposition lawmakers who have even indicated that they want to go around and make sure that all of the holes that are left to continue to send aid, or to send aid to Ukraine or sell weapons to Ukraine, are patched up. Because there is an exemption for, I believe, developing countries, and depending on how you classify Ukraine, point is there might be a way to get them there. But they're quick to try to patch up those loopholes. Point is, these different initiatives where the South Korean president might want to use leverage to disincentivize the North Koreans from sending weapons and continuing cooperation with the Russians, it's hard for him not only to do it, it's hard for him to even threaten it and use the threat of it to dissuade further North Korean involvement, due to the fact that his threat's not that credible because he doesn't have the parliamentary majority or the support of the opposition to do it. And that might be part of the reason, it's impossible for me to say, as to why the South Korean government was talking about the North Korean infiltration in the opposition, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Not because of this one specific reason, but that the idea is that they're undercutting South Korea by blocking this budgetary increases or crucial national security moves. They're undercutting South Korea's security and liberal democracy, so to speak. Look, I'm not in the man's head. I can't find every justification. All I can do is tell you what happened and read you what he said, okay? So let's get started with the full text of the South Korean president's declaration of martial law. And he did this in the middle of the night when most people were going to sleep. To protect liberal democracy and safeguard the safety of citizens from the threat of anti-state forces operating within the Republic of Korea, the following measures are hereby declared across the entire nation, effective from 11 p.m. on December 3rd, 2024. All political activities, including the operation of the National Assembly and local councils, political party activities, political associations, assemblies, and demonstrations are prohibited. So, basically, no protesting, no political demonstrations. So don't protest. Don't assembly, okay? Don't assemble. Don't do any political party activities. And of course, the National Assembly, the Korea's parliament, and local councils, so the more local government stuff, we're shutting all that down. We're shutting all that down. We're not necessarily permanently, but we're at least suspending it until the period of martial law has ended. Any acts that deny or seek to overthrow the liberal democratic regime, as well as the dissemination of fake news, manipulation of public opinion, and false propaganda are prohibited. All media and publications will be subject to the control of the martial law command. Strikes, slowdowns, and assemblies that incite social unrest are prohibited. All medical personnel, including resident doctors currently on strike or have abandoned their post, must return to their duties and resume full work within 48 hours. Failure to comply will result in punishment under martial law. Basically, if you're a doctor, medical personnel, somebody who is, health-wise or for very good reason needs to be available even during the period of martial law, they have to be in their workplace the next 48 hours or face punishment. Measures will be taken to minimize inconvenience. Oh, it also, of course, stops people like, I imagine, dock workers from striking, because if they go on strike, then South Korea is not importing possibly weapons or whatever it might need in a martial law period. Measures will be taken to minimize inconvenience to ordinary citizens who are not part of the anti-state or subversive forces. Violators of this proclamation will be subject to arrest, detention, and search and seizure without a warrant under Article 9 of the Republic of Korea Martial Law Act, special authority of the martial law commander, and will be punished under Article 14, penalties of the same law. So, this was the original declaration I saw. This does not give you much information. This is the first declaration that most people saw. It did not give them much information. Now, people can fill in the blanks with different domestic issues that the president has had. But when he says things like, for example, to protect liberal democracy and safeguard the citizens from the threat of anti-state forces, what this makes me think, and what this would make presumably other people think, is, oh my gosh, is the North Koreans trying something? Are there somebody placing bombs across the country, and they've got to quickly go out there, shut down the country, and try to find them and make sure there's not any large gatherings? Or, you know, oh my gosh, are they going to, was there an attempt on the Parliament building where they were going to go and plant a bomb or do this or do that? But no, we have yet to find any evidence that that is the case. But the way that it is phrased here, protect liberal democracy, this is the type of stuff you would imagine you would be saying if somebody was trying to overthrow the government by force, storming the parliament, try to take it over, change who's president if you can't accept an election, or if you're being invaded. If you're in a position that the South Koreans were in late 1950, early 1951, before MacArthur did his daring, workaround. He juked them out and invaded them from the sea. This doesn't sound like something that comes from domestic political squabbles, which up to this point, that's all we seem to be able to grasp onto whatsoever. We can't find any national security reasons outside of, again, the budgetary debate for this. Let's read the president's speech to give us a better idea, so you get an idea of what I'm saying. Now remember, this is martial law. This is not, hey, everybody, listen to me. This is a speech. This is a justification for the suspension, the temporary suspension of parliamentary democracy, with no end date in sight listed for the public, the end of all publicly allowable political demonstrations, and the end of people's ability to strike in crucial industries and be able to collectively bargain for their labor. So it is the state reaching its hands into the rights of individuals and saying, for security reasons, you cannot have these right now. You might get them back later, but you cannot have these right now. And if you're going to do that to any people, you need good reason. Here's a speech he gave. Honorable citizens, as president, I appeal to you with a feeling of spitting blood. Since the inauguration of our government, the National Assembly has initiated...
A curd is a curd.
Hey Dylan, remember that time Optimus Prime fought a giant robot worm at Chernobyl? Wasn't that crazy?
We're talking about the first time martial law has been enacted in South Korea in 45 years. There's been 12 times martial law has been declared before this in South Korean society. The entirety of it between the years of 1948 and 1979. 12 times. This is the 13th. The first as Korea as a democracy. First time as a democracy. So, in all seriousness, I did see that. That was pretty fucking crazy. Anyway, going back into this. Since the inauguration of our government, the National Assembly has initiated 22 impeachment motions against government officials. And since the inauguration of the 22nd National Assembly in June, it is pushing for the impeachment of 10 more. This is a situation that's not only unprecedented in any country and in the world, but has never been seen since the founding of our country. By the way, to say that the impeachment of your officials, or, officials that are aligned with you, even if 22 impeachments does seem excessive, that's not a particularly crazy thing around the world. The number 22 specifically might be a little, much. But, other countries have impeached officials for corruption and for all sorts of stuff. So, just saying, oh my gosh, a lot of people to impeach, unprecedented. Something being unprecedented does not mean that it's not necessarily unwarranted. I would say that a South Korean president declaring martial law under the democratic period is unprecedented. But that's not an argument against it. You know, the argument, if you want to make an argument against it, you could say, hey, look at the market right now. How did this affect the South Korean won? Does South Korea feel any safer? How are the North Koreans going to use this? Do you think they're going to be like, no, this seems like, you know, the average political squabblings of an... No, they're going to be like, you know what South Korea is going to be like? South Korea is going to be going off. I mean, North Korea is going to be going off saying that this is the end of democracy. This is the instability of democracy. This is democracy at its worst. Democracy, democracy, democracy. Okay. Is dead. Is dead. Is dead. And so I don't like, you can't just say it's unprecedented. You gotta make a justification for it. It is paralyzing the judiciary by intimidating judges and impeaching a number of prosecutors. And it is paralyzing the executive branch by trying to impeach the Minister of Interior, the Chairman of Communication Commission, and the Chair of the Board of Audit, and the Defense Minister. The handling, again, none of this is argue against the, this is why the impeachment is unwarranted. This is why they did not do the thing that is impeachable, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. These are like arguments about, this is all you're saying is, I mean, potentially it's you're either being persecuted or you're surrounded by a bunch of criminals. So you got to make an argument one way or the other, whatever. The handling of the national budget also undermined the essential functions of the state and turned Korea into a drug paradise and a public order panic by completely cutting all major budgets for cracking down on drug crimes and maintaining public security. The Democratic Party is the liberal opposition. Which has, I believe, 100 and the opposition has, I believe, 190 seats in total. Cut 4.1 trillion won from next year's budget, including 1 trillion won for disaster preparedness, 38.4 billion won for child care, support allowances, and a project to develop a gas field in the city's youth for jobs. Okay, see, the first half of this, it was at least in the realm of possibility. Like the idea that the opposition just keeps impeaching and firing all of your staff over and over and over and over and over again in order to stop you from doing anything. Like while I don't think that's necessarily happening, I could imagine a circumstance under which a president would be driven to drastic action. This next thing is just budgetary squabblings. Could we do this? If the Republicans propose a budget cut when it comes to infrastructure, or if they propose a budget cut when it comes to FEMA and disaster response, or when it comes to anything really. I mean, we have these debates and these backs and forths. I mean, how many continuing resolutions did we have under Mike Johnson as he was trying to get those last holdouts in his party to come to heel and accept the fact that the Democrats control the presidency and one of the legislatures, you only have a slim majority over one of them, you're going to have to compromise. But there were so many continuing resolutions. Point is, talking about like, hey, we want to develop a gas field. A gas field? You're ending democracy because you want to make a gas field for youth jobs? Hey, youth, don't worry. You see this democracy that your parents bled for, that your parents fought against the regime for, not only defending it against the North, but also defending it against anti-liberal, anti-democratic dictators who have a long tradition in this country. Don't worry, they bled for you, so you can get this gas field youth job. All you need to trade is Parliament. Really? I can understand how this is frustrating, but this is politics. Another thing here is child care. Another thing here is disaster preparedness. Some of this is funding for cracking down on drug crime. None of this is justification for a declaration of martial law. This is justification for complaining to the press. This is justification for doing your best to go around these plans. But martial law suspends the democratic process, and it is meant to be enacted only when the country is under immediate threat and they need to. So they need to make people suspend their rights to vote, for example, the right to political demonstration, etc. and we're gonna do it because they didn't get the gas field for the youth jobs. Mind you, another thing that was interesting about this is there wasn't even like a cabinet meeting around this. And I believe there technically has to be one for it to even be like allowed. But point is, like, not a lot, putting that aside, because I'm delving into a political realm I don't know much about. It seemed like no one knew. I didn't know, but I'm not in the know. The people I know that know Korea didn't know. Most opposition didn't know. We don't have any evidence that the leadership knew, as in, the current ruling party. And his own party is currently denouncing the president for these actions that they called, and I quote, inappropriate, which is to put it mildly. Anyway, let's keep reading. They even put the brakes on funding to improve the treatment of military officers, including raising salaries and allowances for entry-level officers, increasing on-call duty fees. Now, this is something you put in there. You want the military on your side. Hey, guys, come on. You want a raise? Just go in there and shut it down. You want a raise? Yeah? Okay, sorry. This budget outrage is nothing short of manipulating the national finances of the Republic of Korea. The legislative dictatorship of the Democratic Party, which uses everything, even the budget as a means of political struggle, did not hesitate to impeach the... Sorry, I felt like I just got like radiation. They use the budget as a means of political struggle. Yeah. Is that not what politicians do over the budget? I believe it should be $5 billion more for Social Security. I believe it should be $5 billion more for the military. Like, this is $5 billion more for schooling, or $5 billion more for infrastructure. This is like, what am I supposed? Could you? What would be the equivalent of this? Biden tries to pass the infrastructure bill, says that infrastructure is a national security and priority of the United States. And I mean, our national roadway system was originally built by the Eisenhower administration in order to keep us interconnected and easy to transport troops and such during the Cold War. One of many reasons, but a big priority. So, I mean, you could extend that to say it's a national security priority to have good infrastructure. It's also good for the country. And so if the Republicans didn't want to pass, say, the infrastructure bill, would that be something that he could declare martial law or should declare? Putting aside could declare or would declare, but should declare. Democratic Party, which uses even the budget as a means of political struggle, did not hesitate to impeach the budget. The government is paralyzed, and the people's sighs are growing. The trampling of the constitutional order of the Free Republic of Korea and the disruption of legitimate state institutions established by the Constitution and laws is an obvious anti-state act that plots insurrection. The lives of people are of no concern, and the government is in a state of paralysis due to impeachment, special investigations, and the defense of the opposition leader. Basically, he's also going after the opposition leader for their own charges, is what the government's doing. Our National Assembly has become a den of criminals and is attempting to paralyze the nation's judicial administration system through legislative dictatorship and overthrow of the liberal democratic system. I mean, like, I understand how he feels like it's a failure of democracy because he just got elected and now his approval rating is less than dog feces. And so it's really hard for him to get much of anything done. And so from his perspective, he got elected, people voted for him, he got the job, and now that people voted for him, he got the job, apparently he can't really pass anything without the parliament. But I mean, that's checks and balances, man. It's checks and balances. The National Assembly, which should be the foundation of liberal democracy, has become a monster that collapses the liberal democratic system from within. Now Korea is in a precarious situation where it would not be surprising if it collapsed immediately. Collapsed immediately. My gosh, well, I would like to hear a justification about that. Dear citizens, I declare martial law to defend the Free Republic of Korea from the threats of North Korean communist forces and to eradicate the shameless pro-North Korean anti-state forces that are plundering the freedom and happiness of our people and to protect the free constitutional order. So he seems to be calling those who were undermining, and it seems like most of this had to do with gridlock and the budget. There seemed to be some about dismissing government officials, but most of this seemed to be about gridlock and the budget, which, I mean, welcome to a democratic system. As for this North Korean Communist forces, what is the threat of? As in, they're no longer in Korea? Because I don't believe they are in Korea. There's spies there. Might have a sleeper cell or two. But I mean, there's always the threat of North Korea with its atomic weapons. There's always the threat of North Korea with its, revanchist goals. But I mean, I don't know what they mean by threats of North Korean communist forces. So I'll just put that to the side there. And to eradicate the shameless pro-North Korean communist forces, and to eradicate the shameless, pro-North Korean anti-state forces that are plundering the freedom and happiness of our people, and to protect the free constitutional order. So, to make a long story short, let's read the last two paragraphs. The declaration of martial law will cause some inconveniences to the good people who have believed and followed the values of the Constitution, but I will focus on minimizing those inconveniences. These measures are necessary for the perpetuation of a free Korea, and there is no change in our foreign policy stance of fulfilling our responsibilities and contributions to the international community. As your president, I earnestly appeal to you. I would devote my life to defending the free Republic of Korea, relying solely on the people. Please trust me. Thank you. Look, it is not often that a coup letter, martial law declaration, whatever you want to call it, depending on your political side of the aisle in Korea, inspires me to yawn. But putting that aside, please trust me, thank you. If that isn't a stunning 8K, not 4K, 8K picture of desperation, I don't know what is. So, if I was to guess right off the bat what was happening and throw out to you guys what I would think about something like this, considering we have yet to hear anything about North Korean forces or being shown any evidence of the North Koreans infiltrating the opposition. I think that there is a big chance that this is his last Hail Mary this early into his term. And it is because he's unpopular and the opposition dominates parliament. But, and this is how it works in America. I don't know if this works this way in Korea too. Maybe not to the same extent, maybe to more of an extent, who knows. When bad things happen under a president, they just blame the president. It could be an asteroid. They're going to still blame the president of the United States. And under that mindset, if the government fails to act on things, then they will also blame that on the president. There might be specific circumstances where you might be able to find an exception here or there, but that's usually due to extenuating circumstances. Point is, please trust me, thank you, makes me think that he's, with a low approval rating, no majority, no legislative path, trying to find some version of a political Hail Mary and telling his party to go long as he throws it. Now, they immediately put up their hands and said, this is bad. But that's what I think he was trying to do. Now, it's too early to 100% say. Who knows? Maybe we will find out that there was a North Korean sleeper cell in Seoul, and they took him out, and now he's a hero. But I find that hard to believe. But we will see. We will see. As for what martial law in South Korea looks like, we have some pictures. Here is a infantry fighting vehicle. I believe that's an infantry fighting vehicle. It's hard to say. I'm not familiar with this type of vehicle, but an armored vehicle for sure, patrolling the streets of Seoul. Here is another convoy of armored vehicles, APCs, it looks like, armored personnel carriers, transporting South Korean troops and moving into position after martial law is declared. Now, something that was interesting to me, and maybe you guys will notice this as well, but I heard, and I saw some things that might correlate with that this happened so out of the blue and so unexpectedly that some of the soldiers did not have time to actually gather live ammunition and ended up coming to the parliament building with like rubber bullets. Now you could say maybe they had the like rubber bullets and like some, maybe even some with nothing. Like they have a gun with a clip, but there's no ammunition. If you're not given that much time to prepare, that might be the result. And I could give you an indication of exactly how quick and unknown this was. This is to give you an idea of just how many vehicles were. Imagine you're coming home from South Korea. You just took like a 2-hour walk from home. You said, yeah, you know what? I don't feel like driving today. I feel like walking. You decide to walk home for 2 hours. You got the headphones in. You're just jamming. You're going, you know. It might be like Dead Island 2 trailer, you know. You know, you're just there. You're going. You're walking. And all of a sudden, you just see a convoy of 30 armored vehicles pass you. And they're headed straight for Parliament. You're like, what's going on? Look at your phone. Martial law declared. Would you finish your run? Here is how it looked like from the skies. That is a South Korean helicopter flying above Seoul. Here's another picture of it. As you can see, there's multiple flying above Seoul at the same time. And here is some video. As you can see. This is wild. This is wild. It's not only wild because this seems to be primarily motivated by legislative concerns and budgetary concerns. But it's wild because instead of this spectacle being constrained to Parliament, it is now spilled over into wider society. And I find it hard, especially as that spillover included guns, armor, and the suspension of the democratic system that South Koreans rely on in order to hold their government accountable. Look, 45 years sounds like a lot to somebody in their 20s or maybe in their 30s. But there are South Koreans that remember when South Korea was not such a liberal democracy. When South Korea was ruled by an iron fist after iron fist. Remember I talked about this has been declared 12 times before between the years of 1948 and 1979? Well, the reason why is because there were constant coups. There were constant coups and overthrows and challenges of power, and so it was declared 12 times in that period. But not since, because after they transitioned to a democratic system, this became a lot harder because all you need to overturn something like this is a simple parliamentary majority. Yet, for our friend here, that does not seem to be enough. As for what it looked like on the ground outside of Parliament, well, here is Special Forces, South Korean Special Forces, moving quickly to try to get into Parliament and take over the building before protesters or the opposition or whoever can stop them. And there's quite a few of them. There's quite a few of them. So they march into the building, okay? But to say that it was uneventful would not be the case. These soldiers got scuffle-wished, they got shoved, they got yelled at, they got yelled shame. They were not having a nice time in the customer service department of service in the armed forces. Look at this guy. He's surrounded on all sides here. Look at this. They're perfectly willing to shove these guys. And they're armed. They're in full military gear. They got balaclavas on. They got guns. Who knows how many of them are loaded. But it's just like pure scuffling to try to stop more soldiers from getting into Parliament, because they know that the more soldiers that are in Parliament, the harder it would be to physically remove them, and the easier it would be for them to shut down the parliamentary process. And that is why you're able to see this guy right here. I mean, this guy, honestly, I'm kind of impressed with this guy, because not only is he recording and talking to his family on his phone and trying to document what's going on, he turns around the South Korean Special Forces guy and just throws him back with one arm. Look at this. Point is, South Koreans were on the street and they were against it. And while I don't have a general poll of South Korea, I have yet to find a positive reaction to this. In fact, the positive reactions that I did see, like, what would the positive reaction to this even be? I don't know what the positive reaction for this. Like, if you were trying to find some positive reaction to it, what would your pitch be? No, legitimate. Like, what would? Well, technically, when you think about it, the South Korean president has always had the right to just be like, no, I don't like that budget. We're not going to pay it. So, coup? Oh, I don't like that you don't give me enough money for youth program. So now democracy is suspended. I just don't see it. I just don't see it. I just do not see it. Honestly, the only way I could see somebody make an argument for it is the way it's this guy on Twitter called Irish Patriot posted this. It made me giggle. This is the only way is they start posting QAnon edits like this that you could somehow justify what the South Korean president did.
As my first order of business, I hereby declare martial law. You have to take out their families. When you get these terrorists, you have to take out their families. He's a killer. A lot of killers. You get a lot of killers. Well, you think our country's so innocent?
Yeah. But though, like, for real, like, you're gonna have to get in some weird hyper edit, like simp edits and like weird cult of personality for just like out of nowhere, with no preemption, without even telling your own party, without telling your supporters beforehand, or with no build up, with nothing to seemingly even push people in this direction. You just pull the trigger on this with what plan? So after this happened, like I said, most of South Korean society has rejected this. Some to the point of, I think there was even one South Korean opposition lawmaker who said he is no longer the president of the Republic of Korea. Here it is right here. The president has betrayed the people. He is not the president of the Republic of Korea. Like the vast majority of South Korea. I mean, they voted for the president. Yes. They also voted for the parliament. So who is usurping liberal democracy? Is it the person calling upon a provision last used during a dictatorship and hasn't been used in 45 years to settle budgetary concerns? Or is it the parliament challenging them? And look, I am not saying that I like the opposition. Mind you, part of the opposition are the people who are trying to stop the South Korean president from supporting Ukraine in their struggle for survival. So, no. Even as the North Koreans integrate in the war effort more and more and more, and an Asian army is invading Europe, they don't even want to sell the country defending itself weapons to make themselves feel better. And I know that sounds weird, but that's part of it, is to make themselves feel better. If you talk to some of them, they'll say, we don't want to fuel the fire, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. As if, if you just don't send a person being attacked and brutalized a gun or a weapon to defend themselves, that's suddenly going to end all of the brutalization necessarily. But on the other side, there's this fear of escalation with the North Koreans and escalation with the Russians. Even though the North Koreans are engaging in technology sharing with the Russians, they don't give something like this without getting something in return. Whatever. Point is, I'm not necessarily a fan of all the opposition. Not a fan of this government either, but also not a huge fan of the opposition. But it is clear to me that most Koreans did not want this to happen over the budget debate. And so the opposition pounce and protesters pounce. Lee Jae-myung, he was the leader of the opposition party, and he live streamed himself scaling the walls of the National Assembly.
A curd is a curd.
Anyway, here is him going around the police who had barricaded the parliament and jumping the gate in order to try to go vote to overturn martial law. Look at this. Mind you, this is the leader of the Democratic Party of Korea. This is the main opposition party. The Maryland equivalent. The American equivalent would be what? Like, it would have been Nancy Pelosi a few years ago jumping the Capitol walls over a debate about, what would it even be? Trump's military, not his military increases, mind, it wouldn't be that. For some of his border policy, like, what would it, I can't think about, it'd be a budget dispute. Remember when Biden was trying to pass his budget? We're going through continuing resolution after continuing resolution. It'd be Biden suspending Congress and declaring martial law, and then having Mike Johnson storm the Capitol building. Or now, Hakeem Jeffries in 2 years in 2026. It's absolutely bizarre. It's impossible for me to even imagine that. Hakeem Jeffries or Mike Johnson doing that. But that's the state we're in right now in South Korea. Here is Representative Kim Min-suk, a member of the main opposition party, talking in English for foreign media, because most of the stuff is in Korean, and so I don't want to play too much stuff in Korean. And so I'm going to, because I have a mostly English-speaking audience, so I'm going to play you the opposition mindset around what happened.
영문으로 할 테니 크게. On December 3rd, 2024, at 10:27 p.m., President Yoon Suk Yeol declared martial law. This declaration is illegal and constitutes a criminal act directly violating the Constitution and other laws. It is essentially a coup d'etat. The current political and social situation does not meet the criteria of a time when it is necessary to respond to military needs or maintain public order in wartime or a similar national emergency as outlined in Article 77 of the Constitution. Therefore, the emergency martial law is invalid and illegal, and the President should be held accountable. Additionally, martial law is procedurally invalid as there was no cabinet meeting, which is required by Article 2.5 of the Martial Law Act.
That's why he couldn't even meet the standards of the draconian dictator era. Okay. Again, I said this earlier, but when I heard this, it blew me away. He didn't even have a cabinet meeting about it. Who did he must have asked somebody. It couldn't have just been, he woke up this morning and was like, you know what? You're not going to give me my budget. And he just took out a piece of paper and just started scribbling all this down. He must have talked to somebody. Who did he talk to? Did somebody suggest this to him? That this was a good idea?
This martial law is null and void. It is illegal for martial law forces to enter the National Assembly. We demand the immediate lifting of martial law. 이상입니다. 참고해 주십시오.
Okay, so again, united opposition, basically amongst the opposition, and even there were people against it within his own party. I don't think I even saw anybody in favor of it. And I'm not saying that they don't exist, but I haven't found them. Okay, I'm sure they're somewhere. I just haven't found them. Maybe some old 70-year-old South Korean military officers who think the dictatorship should have never ended. Who knows? But I can't find them. Here is the parliamentary vote that did take place, as people did make their way into the Korean parliament, and they voted 190-0. 190-0 to overturn the status of martial law. Now, you need a majority of votes in order to vote martial law down. And the Korean parliament has 300 seats. Now, obviously, not everyone was there. 190, 300, there's a 110 seat gap there. But 190 is still a clear majority needed to overturn martial law. And so, considering the cabinet meeting problem and considering the bigger issue that they just voted to overturn it, like, legally speaking, martial law should be capped. It should be put down like a deer you hit on the highway. Like, it's done. But that's not immediately what happened. In fact, the military actually came out after it was voted to be overturned, even though there were some, as you can see here, there were some soldiers that immediately after basically started leaving, saying, screw this. Like, I imagine very few of these guys really wanted to be part of this process. Maybe some of them just wanted to get out, you know, actually use their job training for once. But how many of these guys really wanted to do this? They're given the first indication that they might have a reason to go home. They've been getting yelled at by people all day. If they open their phones and go on social media, all they're going to see is going to be the entire country belittling them and saying, why? These guys, they started going home. But the military, not all of them went home, and the military declared that martial law will be maintained until it is lifted by the president. And in the meantime, that gave, while the vote was going on, enough time for the military to scramble to try to shut down the vote before it took place. Look at this.
야, 카톡방에 남겨줘, 공간 진입했다고.
But then they are blocked by people in the parliament trying to protect the vote.
아이고, 야, 지금 새끼들! 안 돼!
By the way, I gotta say, I love that half the wall is just journalists and their cameras. My God, man. That's where every riot these days is like half. It's 33% anarchists, 33% Sony, and 33% Canon. Now, if you're confused as to what that white powder was that just went up into the air, if you look closely on the left-hand side here, you can see one of the employees, and I'm saying employee, I'm guessing here. I don't know for sure, but it looks like there's a lanyard around his neck. So possibly one of the employees of the building, one of the staffers at the parliament, got the fire extinguisher off the wall, and then as they finally got down the barricade, just blasted them straight in their face with the fire extinguisher. There it is. And they go head first, not legs first. It's right in their face. And as you can see, as the smoke clears, it caused the soldiers to retreat. The soldiers were stopped from entering Parliament by some chairs and a fire extinguisher and some angry staffers. My goodness. Crazy day. So eventually the South Korean president, he backs out. He declares that, you know, martial law's over. Maybe not the best idea. I believe the official statement issued was whoopsie doopsie. Oopsie doopsie, I believe. I'm kidding. Here is the official statement from the South Korean president. After the National Assembly demanded to lift the martial law troops have been withdrawn. I will accept the National Assembly's demand and lift martial law through a cabinet meeting. Yeah, but okay. So he has to lift martial law through a cabinet meeting, but he didn't enact martial law through a cabinet meeting. Does he even know how to do it? Did he really just talk? He must have talked to somebody. Maybe that one opposition lawmaker just said the cabinet meeting thing is not true. It's opposition. But he must have talked to somebody. Who told them this was a good idea? Was this like a Trump thing where it's the middle of the night, he's on the toilet, and he's like, you know what? I just got this phone call from Erdogan. I'm going to try pulling out of Syria. And then in the morning, everyone's like, what are you doing? Because like that's the only way I can... How exactly did he think this was going to go down? What is best case scenario for the South Korean president? Yeah, I've been kind of preaching to this point. What's best case scenario for the president? Like in my mind, best case scenario is Yoon Suk Yeol going out there, declaring martial law. The soldiers get to the parliament building in enough time, and he has enough support amongst them because of his supposed pay increase suggestions, that they hold the line and they use force to stop people from going in, because there's always going to be people trying to go in. Hopefully not deadly force, but some force, you know, pushing them back, so to speak. They don't get into parliament because parliament's been shut down, and then they just keep martial law for how long? Because the thing is, he doesn't have a parliamentary majority. Whenever he brings back the opposition back into the fold, once he undeclares martial law, then what? Whatever progress he makes is going to be reeled back on whatever issue he cares about. Like, what was the long-term vision? What was the long-term vision? I just don't see it. Maybe there was some follow-through that I'm not understanding. He certainly didn't think he was going to become the next dictator of the country. I saw some people saying, oh my God, South Korea is a dictatorship again. Who would have thought it? It's always been that way. It's always been that way. But you know, I gotta throw this out there. I gotta commend the strength of both the South Korean democratic civil society, and I have to commend parliament, and I have to commend lastly, like, South Korean institutions. The institution of parliament still functioned despite his attempts to shut it down. The parliamentary members avoided the army to get in there anyway and voted. And civil society and the civilian population quickly protested, quickly opposed the government, and he got immediate backlash. And so under 6 hours, martial law had started and ended, all in the middle of the night. So there's a reality where there's going to be people waking up in a few hours in South Korea. They're going to be wiping their eyes. They're going to be stretching. They're going to be, oh my gosh. Oh, what a beautiful day. The sun is shining. The clouds are puffy. The birds are chirping. And then they sip the cup of joe, bend down, and they pick up the paper, and it says, martial law ended. Now, hopefully, it will not be someone in their 70s and 80s, and then they'll, you know, have a flashback, and then they'll slide into dementia, who knows. But if there's somebody who is not in that state, I imagine they're going to be quite confused as to what happened, how this happened so quickly. I will say right now, South Korean society is not happy. And there's wide calls. Out here, they're calling for him to be jailed. So they want to put the president in prison. These people in the crowd. Now, mind you, he was already unpopular before this, with like a 17% approval rating. After this, I imagine, especially since he backed off of it so quickly, making him look not only like a bullheaded authoritarian, but also like somebody with a jelly spine. I think that's going to only lower his approval ratings further. I don't know who's still going to support him in South Korean society after this, when even his own party wouldn't follow through with this. I don't know if he's going to go to jail. I do find it likely that he is going to be impeached. Now, maybe he can finagle him enough votes away from it. But if you've ever wanted to give the people a reason to impeach you, I could not think of a better reason than this. Do we got any updates? Oh, here it is. Speaking of impeachment, lawmakers ready impeachment bill against South Korea's president. A group of approximately 40 South Korean lawmakers are planning to put forward a bill to impeach President Yoon Suk Yeol as soon as Wednesday. So we're talking tomorrow, according to the Yonhap news agency. Other lawmakers, including some in leadership positions, are reportedly calling on Yoon to step down immediately ahead of any impeachment proceedings. Earlier, the BBC spoke to several lawmakers who expressed this belief at the day's events. Some, like the opposition Democratic Party MP Hong Ki-wong, reported rushing to the Parliament building, climbing over a wall to enter the building to vote against martial law. Yeah, so like I said, impeachment process already going ahead. I would not be surprised if by the end of December, we are looking at a different Korean government, and certainly a different Korean president. President Yoon of South Korea enacted martial law